Story 1. I've been working at Paws and Heart's animal shelter for almost 5 years now. What started as a part-time job during college became a full-time passion once I realized how meaningful this work truly is. We're a small operation on the outskirts of town, operating on donations and a shoestring budget, but we do good work finding homes for animals who need them. Most days are rewarding, seeing a nervous dog leave with a family who'll love them, or watching a formerly abused cat finally trust enough to purr. But some days test my faith in humanity more than others. Our shelter isn't fancy. The building used to be a small veterinary clinic before it moved to a larger location downtown. The kennels are clean but dated, and the play yard is essentially a fenced section of what used to be a parking lot, with some donated agility equipment. But what we lack in luxury, we make up for in heart. Every animal that comes through our doors gets individual attention, proper medical care, and staff who genuinely want the best for them. I remember when Max first arrived 2 months ago. A beautiful 3-year-old golden retriever mix with soulful brown eyes and a coat the color of honey. His previous family had surrendered him when they moved to an apartment complex that didn't allow pets over 20 pounds. He spent his first week hiding in the back of his kennel, barely eating. It took gentle coaxing, daily walks, and countless treats to bring him out of his shell. Eventually, his true personality emerged: playful, gentle, and incredibly affectionate. Yesterday was one of those feel-good days that makes all the hard work worthwhile. A woman in her early 40s came in specifically asking about Max after seeing his photo on our website. She seemed perfect on paper. According to her application, she had a spacious house with a fenced yard, worked from home as a marketing consultant, and claimed she'd been wanting a dog for years, but had been waiting for the right one. Her references checked out, and she answered all our standard questions appropriately. During the meet and greet in our small visitation room, Max was immediately drawn to her, resting his head on her lap and gazing up with those trusting eyes. She seemed equally smitten, scratching behind his ears and calling him a perfect gentleman. As part of our standard adoption process, my coworker and I went through the care instructions, including Max's feeding schedule, exercise needs, and grooming requirements. We specifically mentioned that as a golden retriever mix, he would shed consistently and would need regular brushing. Woman: "Oh, that's fine. I don't mind a little dog hair." She filled out all the paperwork, paid the $250 adoption fee, and left with Max wagging his tail happily, already responding to his name when she called him. I remember watching them walk to her luxury SUV, thinking how lucky Max was to find someone who seemed so eager to welcome him into her life. After being surrendered by his previous family, he deserved someone who would love him unconditionally. I even took a picture of them together for our Happy Tales bulletin board. Fast forward less than 24 hours later, I was in the back room sorting through a donation of blankets when my coworker called me over to the front desk. "Coworker, you need to handle this one. The woman who adopted Max yesterday is back." Her tone told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be good. I walked to the front, where I found the woman standing with Max on a leash, looking irritated and put upon. Max, on the other hand, just looked confused. He recognized me immediately, his tail wagging hesitantly as if unsure whether he was back for a visit or something more permanent. Me: "Hi there. Is everything okay with Max?" Woman: "No, everything is not okay. This dog sheds. I want a refund." I blinked, sure I'd misheard her. Surely no one would return a dog after less than a day for something as normal as shedding. Me: "I'm sorry, but all dogs shed to some extent. Golden retrievers are known to shed quite a bit. We mentioned that during the adoption process yesterday." Woman: "Well, I didn't think it would be this bad. Look at my clothes." She gestured dramatically to the blonde dog hair on her black pants and designer jacket. Max sat patiently beside her, oblivious to the crisis his natural biology was apparently causing. Woman: "I have a white couch. A white couch. It's covered in hair after just 1 day. Do you know how much that couch cost? It's imported Italian leather." Me: I understand that shedding can be more work than expected. We can recommend some good brushes that will help reduce the amount of loose hair, and there are excellent vacuums specifically designed for pet hair. Woman, I don't want to manage anything. I want a refund and to exchange him for a dog that doesn't shed. She said this as if she were returning a defective toaster to a department store. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay professional. This wasn't the first time someone underestimated the responsibility of pet ownership, but returning a dog after less than a day because of shedding was certainly a new low in my experience. Me, ma'am, adopting a pet is a commitment. We don't offer refunds because animals aren't merchandise. They're living beings who form attachments and get stressed by constant changes. I glanced down at Max, who was now leaning against my leg, perhaps sensing the tension in the air. My heart ached for him. Twice now, he'd been brought to a home only to be returned. Woman, that's ridiculous. Every business offers refunds for defective products. This dog is defective, he sheds. Truth in advertising. Ever heard of it? Her voice was getting louder, and Max pressed closer to me, his body language showing increasing anxiety. Me, Max isn't defective or a product. He's a dog who sheds, which is completely normal and natural. If shedding is a deal-breaker for you, perhaps a different pet might be better suited to your lifestyle. We could discuss other options for rehoming Max, but there's a process. Woman, process? I don't have time for a process. I have a charity gala this weekend and can't have guests seeing my house covered in dog hair. Either you take him back and give me my money, or you exchange him for a dog that doesn't ruin my furniture. By now, other staff members had gathered nearby, watching the exchange with disbelief. One was already on the phone, speaking quietly but urgently. Max had moved completely behind me, as if trying to hide from the angry woman. Me, we can take Max back, but our adoption fees aren't refundable, as stated in the contract you signed. Those fees cover the care he received while he was here, his vaccinations, microchipping, and help support our shelter operations for other animals. Her face turned an alarming shade of red, and I worried she might actually stamp her foot like a child having a tantrum. Woman, this is a scam. You're running a scam operation here. Fine, keep the money. But if you won't exchange him, I'll just drop him off somewhere else. Maybe someone driving by the highway will want a shedding mess of a dog. That crossed a line. Threatening to abandon an animal is not only cruel but illegal in our state. I felt a surge of protective anger rise in my chest for Max and any animal this woman might get her hands on in the future. Me, ma'am, I need to be very clear. What you're suggesting is animal abandonment, which is a crime in this state. If you no longer want to care for Max, we will take him back right now, but threatening to abandon him has consequences. My supervisor stepped forward from where she'd been listening. She's usually the calmest person in any room, but even she couldn't hide her disgust. Supervisor, I've contacted Animal Control. They're on their way. We're officially denying any future adoption applications from you, and they'll be adding you to their registry of individuals banned from adopting. Woman, you can't do that. I was just upset. I didn't mean I would actually. Supervisor, threatening to abandon an animal shows you're not fit to be a pet owner. We take animal welfare very seriously here, and so do the authorities. The woman looked genuinely shocked that her threats had consequences. Before she could argue further, an animal control officer arrived apparently. They had been just a few blocks away on another call. After taking statements from multiple staff members who overheard her threat, they issued her a formal warning and confirmed she would be flagged in the system for all shelters and rescue organizations in the state. Woman, this is so unfair. I just wanted a refund. The officer, a stoic woman who had seen it all in her 15 years on the job, just shook her head. Officer, pets aren't consumer goods, ma'am, and making threats against an animal's welfare has consequences. The woman left in tears not for Max, but clearly for herself. I took Max back to the kennel area, giving him extra treats and a new toy to help ease the transition. He seemed confused but relieved to be back in familiar surroundings. Max stayed with us for another 2 weeks before a family with 2 kids aged 10 and 12 came in. They had recently lost their elderly golden retriever to old age and were finally ready to open their hearts to another dog. They also had another golden at home, a 5-year-old female named Daisy. They fell in love with Max immediately, and when we did the meet and greet with Daisy, the two dogs got along as if they'd known each other forever. The parents happily accepted that their house would always have some dog hair, laughing as they shared stories of their previous Golden's impressive shedding abilities. They even brought a specialized brush with them to the adoption, showing they were well prepared for the reality of the breed. Me, so the shedding doesn't bother you. Dad, are you kidding? When we lost our old Boy Scout, I found his hair for months afterward. Each time I did, it was like getting a little reminder of him. We miss him, but we're ready to have a house full of dog hair again. The adoption went through without a hitch, and this time when Max left, I had complete confidence he was going to his forever home. As for the entitled woman, my supervisor posted a compassionate but firm PSA on our shelter's social media page about responsible pet ownership and the commitment it requires. Without naming names, it detailed a recent incident where someone returned a dog after one day because of normal shedding and threatened abandonment. The post went viral locally, with hundreds of comments from outraged animal lovers. Some people in our small community recognized who it must have been, and apparently, she faced significant backlash. She tried to post her side of the story online, claiming we'd misled her about the dog shedding, but nobody was buying it. Several people came forward saying they'd heard her bragging at a local coffee shop about getting a designer dog for a fraction of the price by adopting from a shelter. The silver lining to this dark cloud is that our shelter received a surge of donations and adoption applications after the incident. People wanted to support a shelter that stood up for its animals. One local business even offered to sponsor all golden retriever adoption fees for the next month. And Max. We get update photos regularly from his new family. He's living his best life with kids who play with him tirelessly, a canine sister who showed him the ropes, and parents who vacuum daily and consider the dog hair on their clothes a small price to pay for unconditional love. Sometimes I still get angry thinking about how callously that woman treated him, but then I remember, because of her shallow selfishness, Max found the perfect family who loves every hair on his golden body, and that's a much better ending than either of us could have hoped for. Story 2. I never expected to end up in the middle of a viral story when I took this job at Sunrise Coffee 2 years ago. It started as just a way to pay my bills after graduating with an arts degree and a mountain of student loans. But I've grown to love this place, the warm brick interior, the local artwork on the walls, and most of all, our little team that feels more like family than coworkers. Our shop sits on the corner of Main and Elm, with huge windows that flood the space with golden morning light. We're known for our ethically sourced beans, homemade pastries, and the inclusive atmosphere our owner has worked hard to create. Among our small staff of 7, my colleague has been deaf since birth. She's honestly one of the most talented baristas I've ever worked with. Her latte art is legendary among our regulars, and she can handle the morning rush with more efficiency than anyone. The owner of Sunrise Coffee installed a simple but effective system for when my colleague works the register. There's a polished wooden stand with a neatly printed sign reading, "Hello, I'm deaf. Please write your order on the notepad or use the tablet menu. Thank you." We also have a tablet with our menu that customers can use to tap their selections. Most people are understanding, some are even excited to practice the few sign language phrases they know. Over time, many regulars have learned basic signs like thank you and good morning just for her. Last Tuesday started like any typical day. I arrived at 5:30 am to help with opening procedures, grinding beans while my colleagues set up the pastry display. By 6:15, we had our first wave of customers, mostly construction workers from the site down the block and early shift hospital staff from the medical center across town. They were our regulars who knew the drill and often had their orders ready on the notepad before my colleague even turned around from the espresso machine. I was working the drive-through window that morning while my colleague handled the front register. Our manager was in the back catching up on paperwork, and our other two morning team members were preparing food and backup supplies. The morning rush hit around 7:30, a line of caffeine-deprived customers stretching to the door, the espresso machine hissing continuously, and the familiar rhythm of our workspace in full swing. I was focused on keeping my drive-through line moving when I first heard the voice loud, sharp, and immediately setting off my customer service warning bells. "Woman, hello? Is anyone working here? I've been standing here for 30 seconds. I glanced over while handing change to a drive-through customer. My colleague was finishing an elaborate Rosetta pattern on a latte, her back to the register. The woman at the counter was impeccably dressed in what looked like an expensive business suit, designer handbag hanging from her arm, with a haircut that probably cost more than my weekly salary. "Woman, excuse me. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. My colleague turned around, saw the customer, and immediately smiled. She gestured to the sign and notepad with a pen, sliding them toward the woman. The woman looked at the notepad like it was a dead rat. "Woman, I want a large caramel macchiato with extra caramel and almond milk." Now, my colleague maintained her professional smile and pointed more deliberately to the sign, tapping it gently with her finger. The woman's face twisted with impatience. "Woman, are you serious right now? I'm speaking to you. Are you deaf or just incompetent?" The irony of her question might have been funny in different circumstances. Several customers in line shifted uncomfortably. A regular behind her, a kind older gentleman who came in every morning for his plain black coffee, tried to intervene. Regular customer: "Ma'am, I believe the barista is actually deaf. There's a sign right there explaining the situation." The woman barely glanced at him before turning back to my colleague. "Woman, that's ridiculous. She's obviously ignoring me on purpose. These entitled young people think customer service is beneath them." My colleague, still incredibly professional, once again slid the notepad forward while maintaining eye contact with the woman. I could see her discomfort growing, though she worked hard not to show it. I quickly finished with my drive-through customer and moved over to help. "Excuse me, ma'am. My colleague is deaf. If you could please write your order down, she'll be happy to help you right away." The woman spun toward me with such indignation that I instinctively took a step back. "Woman, this is absolutely absurd. If she can't hear customers, she shouldn't be working in customer service. This is America. I have the right to speak my order." She's actually one of our best baristas. Writing down your order only takes a few seconds, and it would really help us serve you faster. "Woman, I shouldn't have to accommodate your staff. I'm the customer. This is discrimination against people who don't want to write. I have carpal tunnel, you know. Writing causes me pain." This last claim seemed to materialize out of nowhere. She had been clutching her designer handbag with both hands and checking her diamond-studded watch repeatedly, showing no signs of any wrist discomfort. By this point, several people in line were openly staring. A few had pulled out their phones, which I should have recognized as the modern warning sign it was. My colleague noticed the building tension and tapped my arm gently, gesturing that she could switch positions with me. I shook my head slightly. She shouldn't have to deal with this kind of treatment. The woman noticed our silent exchange and scoffed loudly. "Woman, see, you two are communicating just fine. She can understand you perfectly well. She's faking it to avoid serving me specifically. Ma'am, she's reading my body language. We've worked together for 2 years. If you could just—" "Woman, I want to speak to your manager right now." Our manager was in his office reviewing inventory orders, but I knew he'd handle this the same way. He'd been incredibly supportive of our diverse staff and had zero tolerance for customer abuse. "I'll get my manager, but please understand that we have a policy of inclusion here at Sunrise. All we ask is that you write down your order or use the tablet." "Woman, I'm not writing anything. This is discrimination. I know my rights." I went to get my manager, leaving my colleague to continue serving other customers who were patiently writing their orders. While I was gone for barely 2 minutes, the woman apparently decided to escalate things to an unbelievable degree. When I returned with my manager, she had her phone out and was speaking loudly into it. Woman: Yes, I'm at Sunrise Coffee on Main Street, and I'm being discriminated against. The employee is pretending she can't hear me to avoid serving me. It's a hostile environment, and I feel threatened. My manager and I exchanged shocked glances as we realized she was actually on the phone with emergency services. Manager: Ma'am, did you just call the police? Woman: Yes, I did. This is illegal discrimination, and I know my rights. Manager: There's no emergency situation here. Our barista is deaf, and we simply ask customers to write their orders when she's at the register. Woman: She is not deaf. She's ignoring me on purpose. I've been in customer service for 20 years, and I know when someone is faking. At this point, most of the customers in line had either moved to my register or left the shop entirely. My colleague, seeing the escalating situation, had stepped into the back room, visibly upset by the commotion. Our other coworker had taken over her station. While we waited for the police to arrive, a complete waste of emergency resources, my manager tried once more to reason with the woman. Manager: Ma'am, we have security cameras in this shop that will clearly show our barista has been professional and that we've offered you multiple ways to place your order. Woman: Good. The police can see how I've been treated. I'll have your jobs for this. About 15 minutes later, 2 officers arrived. The morning rush had died down, leaving an awkward lull in the usually bustling coffee shop. The woman immediately approached the officers, launching into her version of events before they could even fully enter the building. I could see their expressions change from concern to confusion as she explained that she was being discriminated against because she refused to write down her coffee order. Officer: So no one threatened you or refused service? Woman: They're refusing to take my verbal order. That deaf girl is faking it to avoid work. The officers looked at each other briefly before speaking with my manager, who calmly explained the situation and offered to show them our security footage. He also brought my colleague back out from the break room and explained that she had worked at the shop for over 3 years. While they reviewed the tape, which clearly showed the sign at the register and my colleague's attempts to provide the notepad, the woman continued insisting that she was the victim. Officer: Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage and spoken with the staff. The barista is deaf, as the sign clearly states. The coffee shop has made reasonable accommodations by providing notepads and tablet menus for ordering. Woman: Well, how was I supposed to know she was really deaf? They could be lying. Maybe she can hear some things and not others. Has anyone tested her? My colleague, who had been watching the officer's lips carefully, looked to our manager, who nodded. She then pulled out her phone and typed a message, showing it to the officers. While I couldn't see what she wrote, I could see the officers' understanding expressions. Officer: Ma'am, we've confirmed that the employee is deaf. You've called emergency services for a non-emergency situation, which is a misuse of police resources. Woman: So you're taking their side. What about my rights as a consumer? Officer: Your rights do not include harassing employees or misusing emergency services. I'm issuing you a citation for improper use of 911. The woman looked genuinely shocked as the officer wrote out the citation. My manager then stepped forward. Manager: Additionally, I'm going to have to ask you not to return to this establishment. Your behavior toward our staff has been completely unacceptable. Woman: You can't ban me. I'll sue for discrimination. I'll call the local news. Officer: They have every right to refuse service to anyone who creates a disruption. I suggest you accept the citation and leave before this escalates further. Finally, seeming to realize she had no ground to stand on, the woman snatched the citation paper, stuffed it into her designer bag, and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back for one final announcement. Woman: I'll never come back to this terrible place anyway. The coffee at Starbucks is better. The entire shop seemed to exhale collectively after she left. The officers apologized for the disturbance, got coffee to go which my manager insisted was on the house, and left with promises to follow up if needed. That evening, our shop's social media accounts received an outpouring of support. Several customers who had witnessed the incident had posted about it online, and the story had started to spread. By the next morning, we had a line out the door, people coming specifically to support our cafe and my colleague. Many customers brought handwritten notes expressing their support, and several even started learning basic sign language to use when ordering. Our owner put up a new, larger sign about our inclusive ordering system and added a line to our website about our commitment to accessibility. Sometimes it takes one entitled person to reveal the kindness in everyone else. As for the woman with the designer bag, we later heard through the grapevine that her citation came with a $250 fine. I'd say that's probably the most expensive caramel macchiato never ordered. Story 3. It took us 2 years to plan our wedding. 2 years of saving every extra penny, comparing venues, tasting cakes, and debating whether navy blue or midnight blue would look better for the groomsmen's ties. We went with navy, for the record. I've been a planner my whole life. Color-coded calendars, to-do lists, and emergency backup plans for my emergency backup plans. My now husband always teased me about it, but secretly appreciated my attention to detail. He's more of a go-with-the-flow type, which is probably what happens when you spend your days as a police officer, never knowing what each shift might bring. We met 3 years ago when I got pulled over for a broken taillight. Instead of giving me a ticket, he followed me to the nearest auto shop to make sure I got it fixed safely. He asked for my number to check that everything went okay with the repair. Smooth, right? A year later, he proposed during a hike to our favorite overlook, surrounded by autumn leaves. I cried. He cried. It was perfect. For our wedding venue, we chose the Lakeside, a beautiful restaurant and event space overlooking the water. During the day, it operated as an upscale restaurant, but they closed to the public for private events like weddings. We'd fallen in love with its stone fireplace, wooden beams, and wall of windows showcasing the lake view. It was more than we'd initially budgeted for, but after seeing it, we both agreed it was worth the extra overtime shifts and the part-time weekend job I picked up to make it happen. Our wedding day started perfectly. The weather was exactly what we'd hoped for, sunny, but not too hot, with a light breeze that made the lake shimmer. The ceremony went off without a hitch. My dad cried when he walked me down the aisle. My husband's voice cracked when he said his vows. Our flower girl, my niece, actually remembered to throw the petals instead of eating them like she did during rehearsal. After the ceremony, everyone moved inside for cocktail hour while we took photos by the lake. When we finally entered the reception as Mr. and Mrs. for the first time, the room erupted in cheers. I remember thinking, this is perfect. Absolutely perfect. We had our first dance, cut the cake, and the buffet had just opened when it happened. I was talking to my college roommate when I heard raised voices coming from the entrance. At first, I thought maybe someone from our guest list had arrived late and was having trouble with the check-in. But then the voices got louder, and I could make out a woman's voice rising above the reception music. Woman, what do you mean it's closed? The website says you're open until 10 p.m. I turned to see a group of 6 women, all dressed for a night out, standing at the entrance where 2 of the venue staff were trying to block their path. Venue staff? Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion, but as I explained, the restaurant is closed for a private event tonight. We do have signage posted outside. Woman. Well, I didn't see any sign. I made a reservation online for 7 p.m., and it's 7:15 now. We've been waiting for our table for 15 minutes. Venue manager, I'm very sorry, but that's impossible. Our online reservation system is disabled when we have private events. Perhaps there was a glitch, or you might have the wrong date. Woman, are you saying I don't know how to make a simple dinner reservation? I'm not an idiot. I want to speak to the owner. By this point, my husband had noticed the commotion and moved to my side. Husband, what's going on? Me, I think some people are trying to get into the restaurant. Venue manager, ladies, I'm truly sorry for any inconvenience, but as you can see, we're hosting a wedding reception tonight. I'd be happy to recommend some other restaurants nearby. The woman, who appeared to be the leader of the group, looked past the staff and into the reception area. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted the buffet tables laden with food. Woman, look, there's plenty of space and food in there. You're telling me you can't fit a table of 6? This is ridiculous. She tried to push past the venue staff, but they stood firm. Venue staff, ma'am, please. This is a private event that was booked over a year ago. Woman, so what? These people think they can hog the entire restaurant on a Saturday night. That's so entitled. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was calling us entitled for booking a venue for our wedding. The venue manager motioned to one of the waitstaff, who quickly went to find security. Meanwhile, the woman was getting increasingly agitated. Woman, I demand you seat us immediately. We've been planning this dinner for weeks. It's my friend's birthday. She gestured to one of the women behind her, who looked mortified by the whole situation. My husband squeezed my hand. Husband, I should go help. Me, should I come with you? Husband, no, enjoy your party. I'll handle it. As he walked toward the entrance, several of his coworkers from the police department noticed the disturbance and followed him. My husband had been on the force for 5 years, and many of his colleagues had become our friends too. When the woman saw a group of men approaching, she must have assumed they were the restaurant security because she said, Woman, finally, are you the manager? These people won't seat us even though I have a reservation. My husband, actually, ma'am, I'm the groom. This is our wedding reception. Woman, looking him up and down, well, congratulations, but that doesn't help us. We have nowhere to eat now because your wedding took over the restaurant. My husband, I understand your frustration, but as the staff explained, this venue was booked for our private event. There are several other restaurants within walking distance. Woman, that's not good enough. We're already here, and I can see there's plenty of food. She pointed to the buffet, where guests were filling their plates. Woman, you obviously ordered too much food anyway. What's 6 more people? My husband's friend, who was also a police officer, stepped forward. Husband's friend, ma'am, I think it's best if you and your friends find another restaurant for tonight. The woman looked at the growing group of men, several of whom were in suits, but still had the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. Woman, and who are you? The wedding police. Several people nearby chuckled, which only seemed to infuriate her more. Husband's friend, just a wedding guest suggesting you respect the bride and groom's private event. The venue security finally arrived, a tall man with a stern expression. Venue security. Ladies, I need to ask you to leave the premises now. Woman, we're not going anywhere. We have a right to be here. We have a reservation. Venue security. No, ma'am, you don't. This is a private event. Please leave voluntarily, or I'll have to escort you out. The woman's friends were tugging at her arm, clearly embarrassed. Friend, come on, let's just go somewhere else. This isn't worth it. Woman, no, this is ridiculous. They can't just take over a public restaurant. My husband, it's not a public restaurant tonight. It's our wedding venue. The woman glared at him, then looked over his shoulder at me. I'd moved closer to see what was happening. Woman, is that the bride? Hey, Bridezilla! She shouted at me over my husband's shoulder. Woman, do you really need this entire restaurant for your wedding? You couldn't have picked a less busy night than Saturday? Some people just want to have dinner. I was too shocked to respond. In all my meticulous planning, I hadn't prepared for random strangers trying to crash our reception. My husband, that's enough. You need to leave. Now. The venue security moved to usher the group out, and most of the women started to back away, clearly wanting to escape the situation. But the angry woman wasn't done. She spotted an unattended glass of champagne on a nearby table, grabbed it, and before anyone could stop her, threw the contents directly at my husband. The champagne splashed across his suit jacket, dripping down onto his pants. The room went silent for a beat, and then erupted in shocked exclamations. I rushed to my husband's side with napkins, but he didn't seem concerned about the champagne. Instead, he had a calm, almost amused expression on his face as he nodded to his coworkers. Husband's coworker: "Ma'am, you're under arrest for assault." Woman: "What? It's just champagne. You can't arrest me for that." Husband's coworker: "Actually, I can. You just assaulted a police officer." The woman's face dropped as she looked from my husband to the other men, suddenly realizing that several of them were indeed police officers, even in their wedding attire. Woman: "I didn't. He's not in uniform. How was I supposed to know?" My husband: "That doesn't matter. But throwing a drink at anyone is assault, officer or not." Two of my husband's coworkers took the woman by the arms while another read her rights. Her friends stood by, mortified and apologizing profusely to everyone. "Friend, we're so sorry. She's been acting like this all night. We tried to tell her we should call first to confirm the reservation, but she wouldn't listen." As they escorted the woman out, she kept shouting back at us. "Woman, this is police brutality. I'll sue all of you. This isn't over." Once she was gone, the venue manager approached us, looking deeply apologetic. Venue manager: "I am so sorry about that. Nothing like this has ever happened before. Please, the drinks for the rest of the night are on the house." My husband laughed as he dabbed at his wet jacket. My husband: "Well, that's one wedding memory I wasn't expecting." Me: "Are you really pressing charges?" My husband: "Technically, my buddy already did. But I suspect once she sobers up, she'll be offered a disorderly conduct charge and a fine instead, unless she keeps digging herself deeper." Our photographer, who had captured the whole incident, approached cautiously. Photographer: "So, do you want me to delete those photos, or?" My husband and I looked at each other and burst out laughing. My husband: "Absolutely not. Those are going in the album." The reception continued, and soon the incident became the talk of the party, with guests coming up to offer extra napkins and jokes about champagne showers. My husband changed into the spare shirt he'd brought for later see, planning ahead works, and by the time we had our last dance, the champagne-throwing woman was just a funny story instead of a disaster. The next day, we learned from one of my husband's coworkers that the woman had spent the night in jail and was facing charges for assault and disorderly conduct. Apparently, she continued her tirade at the police station, insisting that we had somehow stolen her reservation, despite the venue confirming they had no record of it. When we returned from our honeymoon a week later, my husband got an update. The woman had eventually pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct, paid a fine, and was ordered to take an anger management course. Her friends had apparently abandoned her at the police station, refusing to bail her out after her behavior. Sometimes when we're looking through our wedding album, we come across the photos of the champagne incident, as we now call it. There's one perfect shot of the woman's shocked face when she realized she'd just thrown a drink at a room full of police officers. It makes us laugh every time. In all my careful planning, I'd prepared for rain, for vendor no-shows, for wardrobe malfunctions, and even for my uncle's inappropriate toast. But I never thought to prepare for a random woman trying to crash our wedding because she couldn't accept that her non-existent dinner reservation wasn't being honored. It's been a good reminder in our marriage that no matter how much you plan, sometimes life throws champagne in your face. The best you can do is change your shirt, laugh it off, and keep dancing.